Okay, here we go with the third of our Open Music Lab series on software synthesizers. All of these are free software synthesizers that developers have made and they want you to use for free. The first two videos were about the Noisemaker and the Tyrell. Both of those are really synths with really great sounds where you can do a whole lot with them. And they're both really good examples of what's called subtractive synthesis, which is subtractive because you create a big signal at the beginning and then you subtract from it. You take bits away through filtering and some kind of modulation. The filtering is through filtering out certain frequencies. The modulation was that slightly more complex thing where you'd apply an LFO to change things over time. And what you saw in the Tyrell synth is that you can apply that LFO across to all sorts of parameters in the synth, and you can also apply your envelopes across to different parameters in the synth. If that all sounds a little crazy to you, you might want to look at the last video again. But also maybe it just still sounds a bit crazy to you because it is a lot of information. We're going to take that a step further in this episode. Because there is another way to construct a synth. There are several other ways that we can have the flow that will create a synthesizer instrument. But another kind of flow is just focusing on that modulation, not on that building a big sound and taking bits away from it, but instead about combining loads of sounds that also affect and modulate each other to generate the exact sound we need in the first place without any need to filter bits of it out. So today we're going to look at a synthesizer that works like that works on the principle of just modulation, which is usually called frequency modulation, or FM. You might have heard that expression before, FM synthesis. Also, FM radio is the same thing. FM radio is also based on frequency modulation, carrying the sound. So I am terrible at maths. I'm not going to try and explain the maths of this today at all. If anyone else wants to explain it, that's brilliant, and please help me out because I definitely can't. But what I am going to do is show you a really, really interesting synth plugin, probably my favorite of the three that I'm showing you in these lessons, but also the one that's hardest to use. Just to be honest, I mean, you can make a great sound of it, but to actually get to understand it is a lot trickier. And it's called Dexed. You can get it from this website, asb2m10.github.io/Dexed. The reason it's called Dexed is because of a very famous synthesizer called the DX7 that was made by Yamaha in the early 80s, and they carried on making it through to the 90s as well. The DX7 was really important because it was a mass-produced synth that was digital rather than analog. So the kind of 60s and 70s synths had been analog, working on the subtractive principle. There were already some synths using this frequency modulation way of working, but the DX7 did that all through a digital, kind of computer within the synth. They made a lot of them, and it was really popular, and it became really important in electronic music. You can find examples of it everywhere in music of the 80s. Someone I really love who uses it is Arthur Russell. He uses it for a lot of his really interesting, beautiful synth sounds and also drum sounds. And yeah, so it was had a big impact. So this plugin is modeled on that synth. It works on the same principle. And so in some ways it's kind of emulating something that's already there, but it's also showing you a way of working which is really different to subtractive synth, but it's really cool. There's so many possibilities within this. So let's have a look at what we've got. So I'm using Ableton again. As I said in the previous sessions, you'll find this once you've downloaded and installed it, you'll find it in your plugins, in your VST plugins, or in your audio units. It's called Dexed. We load it up onto a MIDI track, and this is what we'll see. I'm just going to open it to the first preset. You can see down here on this drop down menu, we've got a load of different presets. There's loads more that you can find online as well. There's only 32 here, but you can download thousands of these online, including the presets from the original DX7 as well, if you're looking to kind of emulate some kind of classic synth sounds. Let's look at this first one called Say Again. And I'm just going to play one note. Okay, so already there's a lot of questions in my mind. Like, what is going on here? This doesn't look anything like the synths we've looked at before. There's maybe one, the only thing that seems familiar is this kind of keyboard at the bottom. Other than that, it feels completely like new territory. I can see some things look familiar, like we can see there's coarse and fine tuning and detuning. Those are things we might remember from how our oscillators worked before. We've got something around here that looks a bit like an envelope, but it's all a bit unclear. And yeah, I don't blame you if that looks quite intimidating. It does to me as well, especially the first time I opened this up, and I just thought, what on earth am I looking at right now? And then when you play it, you're like, wow, okay, a load of beautiful sounds followed by a nasty crunch. But you can see each of these little things is lighting up, so we can kind of guess already, okay, this must be where our sound is getting generated in these 6 things. So let's look at the most kind of important fundamentals here, because there's a lot here and I won't be able to get through all of it, and I'm not going to try to get through all of it. Again, I'm just going to try and get you started with this so you can start to make your own preset and discover how you can use this in your sound. So we've got these 6 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got a load of parameters within them, and then we've got these kind of master boxes at the bottom, and really important is this one. We've got, it says 32, and we've got those 6 on a line along the bottom. This is called the algorithm, and that's going to be really important, because what these 6 things are, they are, as you might have suspected, they are our oscillators. They're what's generating our sound. But in frequency modulation synthesis, this all works really differently, because instead of kind of having our oscillator generate our sound, or multiple oscillators generate our sound and then affecting those with filters and cutting out frequencies, what we're doing is what we have instead is the option of sending those oscillators kind of through each other, modulating an oscillator with another oscillator. We already saw this a bit in the synths we looked at, because that's what an LFO does, the low frequency oscillator. That gives us a series of frequencies that gives us a waveform, the frequencies of which will then modulate our oscillators if we wanted to. But this is a bit different, because these aren't low frequency oscillators. These are oscillators that we're going to hear as well. And I know this probably sounds like a lot of just words at this point, but bear with me. What we're going to see is that this algorithm here, that's what this little box is, with these 6 oscillators in a line. In an FM synth, an oscillator is called an operator. The operator is what generates our sound. The operator can either just play that sound, or it can be passed through another operator called a carrier, which will then modulate that sound. Okay, now let me try and explain and show you a bit how this works. I'm going to click init here. What that does is gives us a kind of blank canvas without a preset where we can start building our own sound. Now, just to make things really simple, this one does make it really simple. Okay, let's look. We've got these 6 operators. We've got a load of parameters that might look quite baffling right now, but among those parameters is one that maybe does look more familiar, which is level. And if I play a note here, you can see that only this operator is on. It's the only one with its level all the way up. Now, if I turn, let's have a look at this algorithm down here. We can see we've got 1 and 3 at the bottom. 1 then goes through 2, and 3 goes all the way up through to 6, and then something loops around at 6 as well. So to start to show you how this is going to work, let's try turning up 2 as well. So you can hear that as we turn up 2, we're not just hearing another sound, we're having that initial sound be changed. If we turn it down again, we're just back to that basic wave. You might have recognized already that's a sine wave. It's that kind of very basic humming wave. That's the building blocks of what we're working with. We're working with a load of sine wave generators. If we just turn up 3, there's no difference in the sound. It's just louder. It's been doubled. That's because 1 and 3 at the bottom, those are our basic operators that are just generating that sound. They're not being, then if we just play 1 and 3 together, they're not changing each other, they're just playing at the same time. Whereas if we turn up 4 on top of 3, we start to hear that sound get changed. We turn up 5 and 6 as well. Again, that sound is getting modulated by the carriers that it passes through. There's other algorithms possible. If we turn this little algorithm knob, you can go through all 32 possible algorithms. The most basic one, number 32, just has all of the operators at the bottom, so nothing is affecting anything else. But you can kind of find all sorts of different configurations, and already, if I just kind of scroll through them, you'll hear the sound is getting changed loads, even though I haven't done anything to the operators yet. I'm just changing which order the algorithm goes in. Okay, so that is the basic principle at work here. We've got our different operators, and then they're going to affect one another to create a unique sound. As we did with the Tyrell, let's just have a little look at some of the possibilities that the presets are showing us. If we go to something like, I don't even know what this is, Chroma. Okay, so we've got some kind of like jangly, kind of sounds like a prepared piano or a dulcimer or something like that. Let's change its algorithm. A whole load of different possibilities in that. Let's have a look at another one. Beat Mare. Okay, so we've got something much more kind of like a nasty kind of sci-fi kick drum sound going on. So, okay, we can see already we've got really different sounds possible. If we look back at that first one, the Say Again preset, we can see that in this case, the operators are playing one at a time, and the last one is making a horrible distorted sound. Now, if we look at that algorithm, you can see why they're playing one at a time. Because each one is just an operator. They're not affecting each other. They're all at the bottom, so it means they're just an operator but playing straight out. But then if we look at these little envelopes here, you can see this is our ADSR envelope. This is actually something we already know about. This is our amplification envelope. This is how loud it's going to get and when. So we've got one that's going to get loud straight away, another's going to get loud a bit later, and a bit later, and a bit later, and a bit later again, and so on. Okay, so now we start to understand a bit what's going on there. But why is that last one so distorted? Well, let's look at number 6 here in the algorithm. You can see it's looping back in itself. That's it's feeding back into itself. If we turn that feedback down, we start to lose some of that distortion. Turn it down a bit more, turn it down all the way. And now it's just another nice, clean sine wave like the others. Okay, are you still with me? So, there we're starting to see some of the basics of how this is working. Each one of these is generating a sine wave. There's a load of different possibilities of how that sine wave is going to be generated, from things like its tuning, like if I start to detune it, detune the coarse tuning, I can make it much higher or lower. Fine tuning, I can kind of working kind of microtonal, slightly different tunings. I can actually change it also to be a fixed pitch rather than ratio means that it's going to play based on the key that I press on the keyboard. If I change it to fixed, it will just hit a certain frequency, and I can choose what that frequency is by moving those tuning knobs. Okay, so now we're starting to see what we've got here. We've got oscillators that can be used to generate a sound, or they can be set to a frequency we can't even hear and just be used to modulate other oscillators. We've got an algorithm which decides whether it's going to play a sound straight away or send it through something else. And then we've got the ways in which those operators can interact with each other when we send them through one another. I know that already sounds a bit complicated, but where it gets really complicated is looking at how that interaction happens. So let's go back to our init, our basic like no preset at all, our kind of basic blank setting. We'll just focus on this chain 1 to 2. It's pretty simple. We're going to have one thing play and then be processed through another thing, which will also play. So first of all, we'll just turn up 2, so we hear, okay, 1 is playing, 2 is also playing, and 2 is also modulating the sound of 1. Let's try messing with that a bit. Right now we can see they're set to the same pitch, f equals 1. Let's try changing that. Okay, we start to get kind of octave combinations. Let's try detuning it and changing the fine tuning. Okay, we start to get kind of slightly nastier stuff going on harmonically, but also we start to be affecting that sound differently. I said I wouldn't go into the maths, and I won't too much. But basically what's happening here is when one oscillator modulates the other, you can choose whether it does it in a way that's harmonic or enharmonic. If it does it in a way that's harmonic, basically that's going to add harmonics to the sound that go with the harmonic series. It's stuff that's basically not going to clash with that sound. It's going to be kind of what our ears expect. When you start to detune it, you're going to bring in a whole range of other kind of frequencies of sound to add to that wave. It's going to make things a little bit more chaotic, a little bit more difficult for our ears. Okay, now let's have a look at this envelope. It doesn't look much like an envelope right now. It's just a complete green box. We don't see anything that says ADSR, but we do have 8 knobs here. I'm going to turn down 2 and just work with 1 so I can show you a bit how this envelope works. This is actually the trickiest bit of this synth because it's really not a user-friendly envelope. What we've got is level and rate. That means instead of having an ADSR where we say like, oh, the attack will take this long, the sustain will be this loud, the release will take this long, we have options of level and time. It's a bit more like working with like a equalizer plugin in Ableton, where you kind of choose where along the frequency something is going to be louder or softer, but in this case you just choose where along the time it will be louder or softer. So like if I move number 1 to be backward in time, you see I start to get a long attack. Very long attack now. You can hear it's really swelling really slowly. If I try and kind of change some of these settings, I can start to then bring a little dip into that. If I bring down number 2, I can bring a dip in volume down into that envelope as well, and I can move that around with the rate setting. So let me try it. So yeah, you can see quite quickly you've got like some quite weird envelopes going on there. And then even kind of weirder than that, we can look at how we have one sound with one kind of envelope, one oscillator going through one kind of envelope, be modulated by another oscillator with another kind of envelope. So I'll take one off, and we'll start from this chain of 3, 4, 5, and 6 that we've got here in the algorithm. Turn up 3. Turn up 3, and we'll turn up 4. Oh, I've just crashed there, my little video, never mind. Just get rid of my crashed face there. So what we start to hear there, you can hear that we had the sound come in just as like the full sine wave, and then we had the modulator come in a little bit later. Okay, that's a basic introduction to what you're working with. You've got an envelope that you can change in a slightly different way to what we're used to. You've got operators that are going to generate your sounds but also modulate each other. And really importantly, you've got an algorithm that you can shift around the order in which things are going to be modulated, which things aren't going to be modulated at all. You can see it gets chaotic pretty quickly. It gets chaotic much quicker than the Tyrell got chaotic, for example, even though the Tyrell had all this amazing kind of options of matrixing different things in different ways. But you can also see that the kind of sounds you're getting can be so kind of interesting and different, and create a kind of level of sound design that really takes you outside of the kind of expected sounds, the sounds that you might have expected yourself when you started making your track. And I think that's a really good thing. So that's the thought I'm going to leave you with. And one other thing. So that was the third in our series on software synthesizers, on free software synthesizers. I put all the links in the description for those synthesizers, as well as a link to download the free trial of Ableton, which they've now made a 90-day free trial rather than a 30-day, which is really cool. So this is a really good time to learn Ableton. Now I'm going to set you guys a challenge. I really want to see what you come up with when you start working with those synths. I want to see what kind of presets you come up with. I want to see how it affects your flow, how it inspires you to make new sounds. And I want to see what stuff really surprises you as well. So your challenge is to make a track with up to 3 instruments, only using the synths shown in these videos. You don't have to use all 3. You can just use one of them, or you can just use 2 of them. You can use any combination you like. Track can be as long as you want. It can be any genre you want. But really important, you have to use at least one preset that you invent totally yourself. Send us what you make. Can be an Instagram video, a link to SoundCloud, a link to YouTube. It can be a file that you send us, and we're going to start compiling the things you guys come up with and sharing them along our social media. We're going to try and get like a conversation going to see what we can make in this crazy time when we're stuck at home. Yeah, that's the challenge. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. One more thing. We're going to be making more videos like this. We've got a load of teachers lined up to make really cool stuff. So please keep following us on social media, sign up to our mailing list, and just get in touch with us if there's anything that you really want to learn about that we might be able to help you with. So stay safe. See you soon.